Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. It is time for part 2. Hopefully you watched part 1, but what have we got lined up in part 2? Do you know?
I think it's more questions. I mean, it's Q&A, so there should be questions and answers.
We'll do the answering.
Yeah, so yeah, of course, as you said, if you've missed part 1, go back watch that because there's lots of other questions in there to be answered by us. And yeah, the rest of the YouTube ones will be in this one, and then we'll have a part 3 as well covering the Patreon questions from our members in our Discord community. So you're in the middle one right now, and well, I guess let's just get to it.
All right. Today's video is sponsored by ASRock and their brand new X299 Creator motherboard designed to support Intel's latest generation of Core X processors. You'll have no trouble getting the most out of the Core i9-10980XE on this board. And as the name suggests, the X299 Creator is also designed for content creators, and that means it packs Thunderbolt 3 technology, 10GB Ethernet, and loads of USB Gen 3 ports. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Since Intel seems to be adding hyperthreading to their 10th gen lineup, do you think that AMD would increase the core count in their lineup with the 4th gen Ryzen? I just quickly don't think it matters too much. Say they kept everything as is, they can just adjust pricing, but it depends what Zen 3 brings to the table.
Yeah, I would be, given they're already offering 16 cores on the mainstream desktop, this being the first generation they did that,
Yep.
I would be surprised if they decided to go beyond that, considering especially, 3950X is a $750 CPU. It's overkill for a lot of the sort of mainstream applications and stuff that most Ryzen 3000 buyers are buying right now.
Yep.
So really where they're going to see the advantage over the 10th gen lineup, for example, like if we get a 10 core processor with hyperthreading,
Intel already can't compete on price.
Yeah.
So AMD are not going to be pressured into lowering prices. Is that what you were sort of...
Oh, well, I was just sort of thinking, like, if you're talking about, comparing AMD to Intel's lineup, it's not necessarily the high core count parts that competition is going to play out, because I would still expect their 16-core CPU to significantly outperform a 10-core 20-thread Intel part, which is the sort of current rumors. Yep. It's more sort of the mainstream parts, like comparing 8 to 8-core, which isn't going to benefit from a core count increase because they're already at 16 cores. And as you say, they could just lower prices to bring your 12-core down to more mainstream pricing. Where I think they'll be more competitive is simply improving their IPC and frequencies. If they move to 7 nanometer plus, and that gives them maybe 10% more frequency, as we saw with something like Zen Plus, then that could be the difference.
That's right. If they get a bit more of an improvement in IPC, then it no longer becomes a situation where AMD has to offer many more cores to be competitive.
That's right.
So they just $20 off the price from what Intel's offering, and they're still going to be like dominating the Amazon sales. So I think they're sitting pretty for the moment. I think Intel needs to make some big breakthroughs with manufacturing processes and whatnot before they can really challenge AMD.
Yep. Another predict the future question here. NVIDIA is claiming their next GPUs will be, in some tasks, 50% more powerful at half the watts. I mean, we'll see about that.
That slide will definitely be like asterisk DLSS was used.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
How confident are you the next gen AMD GPUs will be able to keep up with the next console supporting ray tracing, making the feature an industry standard? How is AMD going to remain price competitive when right now, without this feature, their offerings cost about the same as NVIDIA counterparts that include ray tracing? I think it's important to note with that last part that the pricing of the GPUs is not really related to the manufacturing costs, and that there's no guarantee that like a 5700 XT actually costs $400 to manufacture. It's probably a lot less. And the only reason they're pricing it that way is because the price to performance ratio is slightly in their favor compared to NVIDIA. They want to slightly undercut them while still making the price as high as possible to generate the most revenue and have the biggest margin on their product. So when you say how they're going to remain price competitive, I think they could quite easily integrate ray tracing. It might cost them a little bit more on their GPU to make that change happen, but they should still be able to price it at a reasonable amount. Their margins just might be reduced. The big question, of course, is, how they'll be able to keep up. Who knows? I mean, who knows what NVIDIA is going to bring with their next generation? It's hard to sort of say, if NVIDIA is doing 50% more, AMD needs 50% more. We don't even know if that 50% number is accurate.
No.
So...
refer to our earlier.
Yeah, can't really give you a good answer on that one.
Yeah. Will Zen 3 not be as exciting as Zen 2 was, because it is still on 7 nanometer. Yeah, well, it's not going to be as exciting, I wouldn't have thought.
No.
But if it's as well, because what would you say, Zen Plus? That was a pretty decent step, I thought. It wasn't huge, but I thought like it was a pretty good refinement of first gen.
Yeah, they addressed a few of the concerns. It clocked a little bit higher. They moved like a half node, and which I think we're not going to be necessarily on 7 nanometer. We should be moving like a half node to a
7
plus revision.
Sure, yeah, it will be. So it's really hard to say. It's really hard. I don't think it will be as exciting because that was from Zen 2, from Zen to Zen 2 or Zen Plus to Zen 2. I think that just exceeded everyone's expectations. Like it was pretty impressive. So to get that again would be, that'd be mind blowing, I think.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the sort of like dive into the architecture and see what sort of possible ways they can go with certain things, there's definitely still some areas that they could improve on a 7 nanometer design. And sort of, I mean, I don't want to go too into depth on like how Sunny Cove, Intel's, competing architecture sort of has a few additions that, Zen 2 currently doesn't have. But even just an obvious one is kind of Zen 2 still uses a CCX design. Within their 8-core chiplet, it's still got 2 4-core CCXs. So that's one area they could potentially, still on 7 nanometer, optimize that design a bit and maybe move to an 8-core CCX, which could give them latency and performance improvements.
Depends what it does to production costs and whatever.
That's exactly right. So there's lots of different areas that they could still improve that don't necessarily need that leap in, density or performance or whatever. So I think it should still be interesting, but not necessarily as exciting as that big generational jump.
I mean, that's something I could look at doing as the, manufacturing process matures to make bigger dies. Would be more cost effective. So there's plenty of options there, but I still think it won't be disappointing. I think it'll be something. Do you think Navi 2 will be as buggy as Navi 1? Not even gonna.
It's hard to say, isn't it? Impossible to say. Hopefully they fix it.
You would think by then they'd sort of be on top of it. Hopefully first gen Navi will be sorted out in the not too distant future.
I think with the issue blowing up recently in the past couple of months and sort of reaching a sort of a boiling point on that one, that I doubt they'll make the same mistake twice. Yeah,
if they were struggling to get the higher ups at AMD to justify throwing more resources at solving the problem, I think we've solved that problem, or the community has solved that problem rather.
Yeah.
So we just helped it along a little bit, along with a few others. What product? And I'm going to make you answer this because I always answer it with something random because I hate being put on the spot and it's not that great answer. Then you come in with a good answer and I'm like, damn it.
Okay.
So I'm just going to have you answer it first. Then I'm going to steal Tim's answer and then we're done. What product was under embargo were you most hyped for? So, or what was most difficult to keep secret?
For me, I think it was definitely the Zen 2 launch. I think there was so much, especially since we'd sort of been building our Discord community for Hardware Unboxed, and it was sort of much bigger than it was. Well, I don't think it even existed around the sort of Zen original launch. Anyway, we had that big community that was, I saw you were doing the testing at the time.
I was sending you graphs.
Yeah, I'd sort of seen all the performance numbers and stuff, and that was a few days out, and there was a lot of discussion in the community on Reddit and all those sort of things, particularly focused on the gaming performance of the chips. And sort of at that stage, everyone was expecting it to decently outperform Intel's parts at the time. They were sort of thinking, people were going, oh, will it be 5 or will it be 10% faster than a 9900K? And at the time, I sort of knew that it was slower. So I think that was really hard to keep under wraps because you see so many people saying these things and getting all hyped up, and I'm always like, ugh.
A lot of people were convinced it was going to wipe the floor with Intel,
and so I had already seen the numbers, and that was quite difficult.
Also tempering expectations on that one. Look, I was going to pick that either that or the 3rd gen Threadripper. That was also really cool as well. Does voltage, assuming a reasonable value, degrade chips per se, or does it degrade the chips as a consequence of increased temperatures? I look at Tim. Tim's like, what do you look at me for?
Yeah, you're an expert on this one.
Well, I'm not really an extreme overclocker or anything, but yes, increasing the voltage does degrade the component. And obviously, if you increase the voltage too much, it degrades it to the point where it just detonates on the spot. But that's usually, with the correct safeguards in place, should be difficult to achieve. But you will be shortening the life of the CPU. But having said that, like, I've run parts at the highest, well, the maximum safe voltage at the highest frequency it can do, and I've had parts run for many, many years, well beyond you will want to use them for. So,
yeah, I think with any sort of component, the engineers come back and they give you like a range of things that it's known to run well in. And if you exceed any of those sort of things for a significant period of time, all of those things will end up degrading it, whether it's your running voltages too high, whether it's running, your temperature's too high or temperature's too low. You never know what's going to, cause it, but there'll definitely be specifications for those parts that if you exceed it, it's going to cause issues. Hey, Steve and Tim, do you think that there is a place in the market for 6 or 8 core Ryzen APUs on the desktop? Given the current pricing of the Ryzen 5 3400G, it would be safe to assume that a 6 or 8 core APU would be a noticeable price jump. At that point, would you be better off with the first or second generation Ryzen CPU with the cheapish GPU?
Depends what you want to do with it. It would be more of a part for someone who doesn't want a discrete GPU. So like a powerful sort of compact home theater PC, or maybe a business PC, something like that.
I would even think like a mini ITX editing rig or something would really benefit from an 8-core with the APU in it, so that you don't have to put a GPU in it. Like our Computex systems where, we were using Ryzen in there, the 2700X, and we had to put, a small GPU in there. That probably would have been fine with sort of more of an APU type product, considering we only put like a 1030 or
it's just a bit more flexible. So you could put like an expansion card with like high speed PCIe 4.0 storage on it. Like a couple of terabytes of storage on that. And because you don't need the graphics card, and you can just GPU accelerate with the integrated GPU. So I think there's definitely a place in the market for it, but for the sort of lower price parts, you'd be hoping there was maybe like a quad core option and or that sort of thing available for that APU, which would slot into the place of the 3400G. And failing that, again, as you say, first and second gen Ryzen CPUs should still be available for cheap, like the dirt cheap prices that we currently see, allowing those sort of budget builds. Yeah, so it would be useful for some people. Definitely not going to be a bestseller.
No, I wouldn't have thought
so. But it'd be an interesting part, and serve a purpose for some. When planning a PC build with a thin budget, a Tim budget, what components do you guys prefer to be future-proof? For example, would you buy an oversized PSU or a better case, etc.? I don't think anything really. I mean, it depends on. Generally, it's like best value components. So if you're picking your graphics card, you look at sort of your budget, what offers the most cost per frame, the best performance. So you pick whatever in that category, and then it may have a 6 gigabyte VRAM buffer. So do you spend $50 to $100 more for extra VRAM to future-proof? I don't really think that's a wise thing, depending on, like, for me it wouldn't be, because I'm happy to turn down the textures to fit within that 6 gigabyte frame buffer. For me, it's not worth spending that extra money to do that. So everyone's different. And then with the CPU, for example, 6-core, 12 threads, fine right now. And we had this discussion when we were talking about 3rd gen Ryzen. So you can pay, let's go off MSRPs, not current sale prices. Ryzen 5 3600, $200. Ryzen 7 3700X, $330. You get those 2 extra cores. Yes, at some point in time, that will allow you to avoid stuttering and stuff like that in games. But is it worth paying $130 US right now to future-proof that? Seriously doubt it, because that's, another $70, and you've got the total cost of a Ryzen 5 3600. So in a generation or two, you can buy that equivalent processor, which will have 8 or more cores and have higher IPC, maybe support something like DDR5 memory, whatever else. So I don't think there's too much point future-proofing those parts. Future-proofing your motherboard's VRM. Hey? Hey, maybe that's a good idea. But again, you don't really do that at an extra cost. You just research the motherboard, and you don't buy an $170 motherboard with a crap VRM. You buy a $170 motherboard with a good VRM.
Yeah, I think well with all these questions of future proofing, it depends on what your sort of plans are.
Yeah,
if you plan on sort of sitting there and thinking, oh, I'm buying a 3600 now, might upgrade to a 3950X in the future. As you say, you might choose the $170 motherboard with the better VRM on it. And yeah, for example, if you need like a ton of storage now, I tend to think that storage is a component that you can bring across generations very easily. You might think, oh, I might need 1 terabyte now, or whatever you choose at the time. So it just depends on, where you sort of see yourself going as to what things you might buy. Like cooling is another example. You might buy a sort of 65 watt CPU and put a liquid cooler on it, because your plan is in the future you will be upgrading to a 3950X or 3900X where that cooler makes more sense.
And in that case, I'd recommend a good Noctua type air cooler, because all-in-one liquid coolers probably aren't going to last long enough anyway.
Yeah, that's probably right.
But yeah, those examples all work. But generally, it's just getting what makes sense in your budget now. And if there's something you definitely need, whether that's like Tim said, more storage or more CPU cores or whatever, but that's not really future-proofing. That's just what you need now. So I think just buying the best value components that you need now that won't be obviously obsolete in a short period of time. Like, don't buy a quad core, for example, or a 6-core processor with 6 threads. Probably don't do that either.
How much of a difference does color calibrating a display make? Can you use a calibrated gaming display to edit photos, or does it barely make a difference in accuracy? Like with a lot of these questions, it does depend on the monitor. Some come well calibrated out of the box, some are more on the horrendous end of the scale. So I'd say in general, especially for gaming displays, it does make a pretty big difference. But then it's one of those situations where only some applications actually support your color calibration. So all your professional apps will very easily support it, but games often override your profiles and use their own sort of color grading.
I don't think it matters in games.
So it doesn't really matter too much in games. As for your part on, can a calibrated gaming display be used for editing photos? Definitely. Definitely. That's personally what I do. I've got a gaming monitor that I use for all of my video editing and stuff.
That's why Tim's videos always look weird.
That could be it. But yeah, definitely if your use case was buying a gaming monitor that you want to also use for that sort of work, then calibrating it will make a pretty big difference. So just generally something I'd recommend in that sort of field. Okay, interesting on this one. Do you think AMD will penalize Asus for their blame shifting with the RX 5700 XT? Could AMD perhaps design all their own chipsets moving forward instead of contracting AS Media, which is a division of Asus, to design these chipsets?
I don't think over like those comments they made in that written press release or statement, whatever you want to call it, on the ROG website, I don't think they're taking that too badly. I'm sure AMD wasn't happy about it. I'm sure Asus and AMD have had a chat about it. I don't think there'll be any ongoing penalties or anything like that. There'll be no allocation issues or, I don't think there'll be anything like that. I think there will definitely be some words behind the scenes about it, as these companies often do. But beyond that, I think probably Asus has learnt a few things from this as well, because they were quite surprised that we and others took it to mean that they were blaming AMD. I don't know how else you would interpret their words, but to them that was a surprise. So they may be a bit more careful with how they handle these things in the future. It was very poorly handled, so hopefully they can do better. But as for AMD penalising them or whatever, no, I don't think so. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yep.
Why doesn't AMD make 10, 14, 18, 28, 56 core processors? Surely having a CPU in every price point would increase sales.
Thank the Lord they don't. They'd be the biggest troll ever if they did. Just quickly, I think that would suck. I hate, heavily segmenting the market that way. And it also doesn't work due to the way that their CPUs are designed with the chiplets. It'd be a bit of a mess. Some combinations are possible, but whether they make sense, whether they need to, is another story. And I don't think they need to really increase sales. If you look at anywhere where you can actually do some sort of market research on sales, current desktop CPU sales, AMD is obliterating Intel. I can't overstate that enough. Like, it's a bloodbath.
Yeah, and I think one of the really key points with this is, if you look at the sort of suggestions that you've made, sort of 10 and up cores, you're really talking about high-end processors at that point. AMD already does segment by cores pretty pretty normally in sort of those lower price points where they see the most volume.
Yep.
And when you see people really fighting over price, they do have, they've got their last generation 4-core options for APUs, for example, and then they go 6 and 8 cores right up to sort of your $300 or $400 price points. And beyond $400, you're getting into quite expensive territory for a CPU. So when you sort of think about that and you think, well, it's only these high-end parts that you're starting to segment, generally the budget concerns are less of an issue than someone buying sort of your $200 range.
Yeah.
So someone needing to say spend $200 or $250 is different from someone that might be spending $500 or $600, where sort of you might think that a 10 or 14 core CPU would fit in.
Yeah, I mean...
So it just makes less sense in those high tiers to offer those sort of parts. Even on HDDT, we've always seen that it's usually the flagship, the maximum core count part that sells the most, and the lower core count parts don't sell at all.
And that's because how much you're spending on your motherboard and memory. So you're not going to be like, oh, should I get a 56 core or a 64?
Yeah.
You know, should I spend $3,500 or $4,000?
Yeah.
And that's why Intel's Skylake X range was an absolute joke. And it was a desperate move. They just tried to flood it with all these options to confuse people into buying an Intel CPU. And it was a ridiculous lineup because, again, here with like, you've got 6 to 8, which is, at the lower end, it makes a little bit more sense. But then you go 8, 10, 12, and then 14, 16. It's just too many options. And especially at the high end, as the example you just said, it just doesn't make sense. And even the 24 core to 32 core, most people were buying the 32 core. And the 32 core makes sense because it's then 32 cores or 64 cores, and it's a doubling of price. So you sort of need to know that you need the 64 cores there. But anyway, I agree with everything Tim said on that one. Tim, what are your expectations of Intel's hardware this year?
Oh, okay. Throwing me under the bus on the prediction. Predict the future. I'll just get my crystal ball.
You've been run over and then backed up on.
I should buy a crystal ball I can bring out for these things and sort of give it a bit of a rub and see what's going on. Well, what are my expectations? I expect 10 nanometer Tiger Lake. I expect 14 nanometer Comet Lake. I expect their desktop and high-end sort of laptop chips to still be 14 nanometer throughout this year. I expect we'll get 10 nanometer plus for low-end power stuff at the end of the year. I expect that to perform a little bit better. Comet Lake's going to probably introduce more cores and do things like hyper-threading across the lineup. It'll probably perform a bit better. Those are my expectations. That's probably as much as I can give you that I think is fairly likely to happen.
Yeah, I expect that as well.
So as for like pricing and stuff, who knows where they're going to lower pricing.
Yeah.
Who knows what sort of performance they'll be able to get out of Tiger Lake later in the year. It's just up in the air on all that one.
Yeah, it should be interesting though. Hopefully we can see a bit of a battle there.
I do think that depending on the pricing they can land at these chipset, that they should still be competitive. Like, as ridiculous as it sounds, considering 14 nanometers been out for 5 years on like Skylake, they have an opportunity to be competitive.
As long as supply is not atrocious, they'll be fine.
Yeah, like there's no situation in my eyes where they're just going to be completely blown out of the water, because they still could price their chips at the right position to be competitive.
Can't
whether or not they
wait
do
till
that
the
or
end
not.
of the year. It's like Zen 3's way better than expected.
Yeah, well, that's possible.
Nah, who knows? We'll see what happens.
They've been competitive so far with 14 nanometer and their 8-core chips, and it's possible they will continue to be competitive for another
At the high end, like the 900K is competitive, but in terms of like sales and what's going on, it's just doing that for them at the moment. It's just it's going downhill.
If they dropped pricing to a more appropriate level to match their performance level, then they would that would go
help.
like that. So
yeah, they've got reasons why they can't do that. But anyway, we'll see what happens. Now that DLSS is finally viable, thanks to Tim and his multiple critical analysis. Oh, wait, they didn't say that. That's weird. And knowing that Steve likes to use Wolfenstein in his benchmarks, I think that's a jab at me. But anyway, what is the current thought on benchmarking using DLSS in applicable games?
Really interesting one.
Probably a question sort of more for me, but you answer it for me
really
again.
Interesting, because I think
I'm outsourcing.
I think at this stage it's really going to depend game by game, because I think that the technology is good in Wolfenstein, but I'm not 100% confident that is going to be this case in every game. And certainly for the early days of the technology, until we're sort of very confident that this is going to be like no quality impact sort of situation, there's going to require us testing each and every game we want to benchmark with DLSS.
Yeah.
So
I think, if Tim gives me the all clear that, there is no no quality loss, then perhaps we would work towards a situation where we would test with and without. and show that up against AMD, and perhaps they come up with something, but short of that, then we would be just showing against AMD.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's kind of a situation in Wolfenstein where if you have an NVIDIA card, there's no reason why you should be running that game with DLSS disabled. You certainly should have it on, and the quality is equivalent to, as I said in my video, it's not identical, but it's certainly equivalent enough that a person playing the game would see no difference. And unless you had a direct side-by-side, which people aren't going to do.
Yeah. So, I think in that case, we would test, we would show on and off, and then compared to AMD.
I think it is a bit different to a situation like with DirectX 11 and 12. Obviously, in the past, we've tested with, say, an AMD card might run the game better at DX12 mode. NVIDIA might run it better with DX11. That's a little bit different because the quality there is actually identical, regardless of which option you choose. But I think as we see more of these technologies, in variable rate shading is another one that does have a very small change to quality because it does shade different areas.
I think as long as you're showing both, though, there's not too much issue. Yeah,
there's no issue showing both. I think previously with DLSS, you couldn't realistically show like Battlefield 5 with DLSS performance because it's like, well, that's not even this. You're not getting the same game.
No, you must be running at 720p.
So moving forward, it'll probably be a situation where it's at least tested with both for now, unless they do something like implement it at a driver level and just they go with it for everything, in which case you've got no choice.
Well, then then there's more emphasis put on actual image quality comparisons to see if they, because at that point it's like, are they cheating?
Yeah.
So,
but I think as we sort of hit the limits of some things, there might be more of this cheating going on with these sort of techniques, and you will see different companies have different ways of sort of cheating the image to give you similar to native quality with performance benefits, and interesting future coming up for those things, I think.
Yeah, that's right, because it's not outright cheating, it just depends on how far they take it. If it's a Battlefield type image quality, I would consider that cheating.
Yeah, that's definitely cheating. Whereas Wolfenstein, I'd be quite comfortable showing DLSS on numbers for that game because realistically, if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you're getting much better performance at the same sort of image quality that AMD. So
that seems good to me. How long do you predict it will take until 6-core with HT, so with SMT, is no longer good for gaming?
Want to throw out a number?
Oh, doesn't matter. You might as well. It's just random.
5 years.
I think within 5 years, for obviously titles released in 5 years' time, I would say absolutely. In a year, don't think so. I don't know. It's hard to say with this stuff because sometimes it just moves like this, just glacial, and then other times it's like, oh, here's a jump.
Yeah.
So
sometimes they just hit that more cores button and suddenly it's unlocked and everyone gets rolled on their quad cores.
Yeah, I don't think you have to stress too much about your Ryzen 5 3600 or 2600 or whatever else becoming your 8700K, chuck an Intel processor in there.
I think it'll be longer than a typical CPU generation for people upgrading.
Well, even quad cores. If you have a quad core with SMT, it is still fine in most games. Like, it's still fine in really all games. There's none where it's terrible, but remove SMT and it is terrible.
Yeah.
So we're still at a point where 8 threads will get you by on a CPU with a reasonable clock speed IPC. So when it gets that with 12, probably a while away. So yeah, I wouldn't be going future-proofing with 8-core, 16-thread CPUs for gaming or anything like that. If you can afford it, fine, but don't push the budget for it. I don't think it's going to pay off on that one. And what do you think? What do you reckon? Comment to wrap this thing up. Do you think the Ryzen 4000 series will be compatible? This is actually a pretty good question with the B3, 350 and X370. Yeah. So, interesting question, just because there was all those rumors and rumblings that wasn't going to be the case with Ryzen 3000, and it turned out that it was. And I would say yes.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some concerns around the BIOS sizes for some of those boards.
It's going to be a problem.
So that will definitely be a problem. The question is whether manufacturers go with like a dual BIOS situation where you can download the version for 1st and 2nd gen Ryzen and a version for 3rd and 4th gen.
Which I think is an obvious solution, but no one's done it.
I think there will be no technical reason why they can't run.
Yep.
But I think that there will be some products that actually won't support it because of this BIOS.
Yeah, it'll be a situation where someone, I'm not going to name it, just an AIB will put their hand up and go, no, we're not doing it. too much of a mess, too much of a problem. They may choose that initially because of all the drama we saw this time around. But I think eventually they will get pressured into doing it.
I think that's fair. I think that's likely. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, speculation, who knows? We're just guessing. So it's one of those what do you think things again. And that is going to do it for part 2. We'll pause it there. Well, that's actually all the YouTube community tab questions.
I mean, to be fair, it wasn't actually all of them. We did get a lot of questions. We had to pick and choose a bit there.
That was all of the questions that we had time to address. Well, the most heavily upvoted ones.
Yes. We'd like to answer the ones that you guys wanted to see answered. So I think we covered probably about 90% of the heavily upvoted ones. So yeah, I think it was really good. As I said at it's a long time ago now, but at the start of part 1, I thought this would be a really good month for the Q&A, and I think it's been, really good.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah, well, I mean, last month we had CES, but I think most of them were probably focused on CES, and some people didn't really like CES. So yeah, there was just a whole random bunch of interesting comments, I thought.
So hopefully you've all learned something.
Questions,
All that sort of thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've got Patreon. You can get access to our monthly live stream, Discord, all that stuff. You guys have heard the spiel before.
Yeah.
But it is good stuff. Subscribe, like.
Bell button, like
the
button.
YouTube stuff.
Click on our recommended videos when they pop up.
But above all else, thank you for watching.
Yep.
Who are you?
Jim? No, Tim.
Most people probably don't know that you are Tim. And of course, I'm Steve.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see you again next time.